There's an emotion that feels like a slow poison. It's that quiet, bitter heat that rises in your chest when someone asks for just one more thing. It's the tight jaw you feel when you say yes on the outside, while your entire being is screaming no on the inside. It is the exhausting, corrosive feeling of resentment. For the person who has spent a lifetime being nice, agreeable, and helpful, this emotion can feel deeply shameful. It feels wrong. It feels like a character flaw, a sign that you are becoming a bitter, ungrateful person. You may even try to suppress it, to push it down, telling yourself you shouldn't feel this way. But what if I told you that this resentment is not your enemy? What if it is the most honest and trustworthy messenger you have? What if this feeling is not a sign that you are breaking, but a sign that you are finally learning to protect yourself? The great psychologist Carl Jung taught that the parts of ourselves we judge most harshly, the parts we exile to the shadow, often hold the most vital information for our healing. And resentment is a direct message from the guardian of your soul. It is a spiritual alarm bell forged in the fires of your deepest, unmet needs. It is not a flaw. It is a function, a perfectly designed internal guidance system telling you that a boundary has been crossed. This is the profound lesson at the heart of shadow work. Today, we will stop judging this powerful emotion. We will stop feeling guilty for its presence. Instead, we will learn to listen to it. We will learn to decode its urgent message. And in doing so, we will transform this poison into your most powerful medicine. To decode the message of resentment, we must first understand why it is showing up now with such intensity. For years, perhaps your entire life, you may not have felt much resentment at all. You were the easygoing one, the low-maintenance friend, the go-to person. You operated on a kind of autopilot of agreeableness. So what changed? You did. You began the courageous work of healing. You started the process of shadow work. You began to value yourself. Think of your personal energy, your life force, as a country. For a long time, this country had no real borders. Anyone could come in, take what they wanted, and leave. You were praised for your generosity, for your open-door policy. But your country was being depleted. Your natural resources, your time, your energy, your emotional bandwidth were being strip-mined, and you were getting exhausted. The inner work you've been doing is the process of finally establishing a sovereign nation. You are learning that your energy is not an infinite public resource. It is a precious, finite, and sacred part of you. Resentment is your newly installed border patrol. It is your spiritual alarm system. It is the fiercely loyal guardian that now stands at the gates of your being, and its job is to alert you anytime there is a potential invasion. This is a profound and healthy development. It is a sign that your psyche is no longer willing to tolerate self-abandonment. Let's think about a woman named Emily, a graphic designer in her late 30s. Emily has always been the helper in her friend group. Her friends know she will drop everything to listen to their problems, offer advice, or help them with a project. Her persona is the supportive friend. Recently, a friend called her in a panic, needing help designing a flyer for a last-minute event. The old Emily would have immediately said yes, canceled her own quiet evening plans, and stayed up late working on it, fueled by the validation of being needed. But this is the new Emily, the Emily who has been doing her shadow work. As her friend made the request, Emily didn't feel the usual impulse to please. Instead, she felt a hot, sharp pang in her chest, a tightening in her gut. It was resentment. Her internal alarm bell was screaming. And this is where the first lesson of resentment lies. Carl Jung taught that the unconscious often speaks to us through the body first. Resentment is not just a thought. It is a felt physical sensation. It is your body's wisdom telling you, before your mind even has a chance to rationalize, that a line is about to be crossed. The resentment is the signal, a pure, clean signal. The suffering comes next. The suffering comes from the war that breaks out in your mind after the signal. Emily's mind immediately went into a familiar spiral of guilt and self-judgment. I'm a bad friend if I say no. Her need is more important than my need for a quiet evening. I shouldn't be feeling so angry about this. She's my friend. This is the old programming, the voice of the conditioned persona trying to shut down the alarm system. It is trying to convince you to ignore your own border patrol and let the invaders in because that is what feels familiar and safe. But what is the alarm actually signaling? What is the specific message that resentment is trying to deliver? Resentment is almost always a sign of one of two things. A boundary has been crossed, or a boundary needs to be established where there has never existed before. In Emily's case, it was the latter. There was no pre-existing boundary around her evening downtime. It had always been open territory. The resentment was her shadow, her newly integrated sense of self-worth rising up to say, "Hold on, this territory is no longer public property. This time is sacred. This energy is ours. A boundary is needed here." The resentment is the pain that tells you your hand is on a hot stove. The pain is not the problem. The pain is the messenger, delivering life-saving information. The problem is keeping your hand on the stove. For the recovering people-pleaser, this is a revolutionary idea. We have been taught that the pain, the resentment, is the problem. We think we need to get rid of the resentment to become more zen or forgiving. But trying to get rid of resentment without addressing the crossed boundary is like taking a painkiller for a broken arm and then continuing to use the arm as if it's fine. It doesn't solve the underlying issue, it just silences the messenger, allowing more damage to be done. Your resentment is not a sign of your spiritual failure. It is a sign of your psychic health. It is the immune system of your soul kicking in to fight off an intrusion. It is your anger, an emotion you likely exiled to your shadow long ago, finally coming back online, not as a destructive rage, but as a clean, clear, protective life force. It is the voice of your deepest needs, which have been silenced for years, finally finding the strength to speak. So the first step in working with resentment is not to push it away. It is to say, "Welcome. Thank you for the message. I am listening." Welcome. I am listening. This simple internal shift is the beginning of a new relationship with your emotions. You are moving from being a victim of your feelings to becoming a student of them. So, once you have welcomed the resentment, once you have acknowledged its presence without judgment, the next step is to learn its language. This is the practical work of shadow work. It is about becoming a skilled interpreter of your own inner signals. I want to offer you a simple two-step process you can use any time you feel that familiar heat of resentment rising. Think of it as your own personal diagnostic tool for the soul. The next time you feel it, I want you to pause, take a breath, and ask yourself the first question. Step 1. The boundary question. The question is, in this situation, what no needed to be said? This is a powerful inquiry because it cuts through the fog of guilt and focuses on a concrete action. Resentment often flourishes in the space where a no was required, but a yes was given. Let's go back to Emily, our graphic designer. When her friend asked for help with the flyer, Emily's resentment flared. If she were to ask herself this question, the answer would be immediate and clear. The no that needed to be said was, "I'm sorry, I can't tonight. I'm exhausted and need to rest." Or consider another scenario. A man named Thomas gets resentful every time he has dinner with his parents because his father always makes critical comments about his career choices. What is the no that needs to be said? It might be, "Dad, I love you, but I will not discuss my career with you anymore. If you bring it up, I will have to end the conversation." This no is not an act of aggression. It is an act of clarity. It is the verbal equivalent of drawing a line in the sand. It is defining your own territory. Sometimes just identifying the no is enough to bring a sense of relief. It clarifies the situation. But to go deeper, we must ask the second question. Step 2, the need question. The question is, what core need of mine is being violated or ignored right now? This question takes us from the external boundary to the internal value. It is the why behind the no. Carl Jung believed that our strongest emotions are always tethered to our deepest psychic needs. In Emily's case, her resentment was pointing to a profound, unmet need for rest, for solitude, for the right to her own time and energy. Her no was in service of that need. For Thomas, the resentment he felt towards his father was not just about the criticism. It was pointing to a deeper need for respect, for autonomy, for the right to be accepted for who he is, not who his father wants him to be. Other common needs that resentment often guards are the need for peace, the need for appreciation, the need for creative expression, the need for fairness, the need for safety. When you can name the core need beneath your resentment, the entire emotional landscape shifts. The resentment is no longer a vague, bitter feeling. It becomes a sharp, focused pointer, showing you exactly what part of your soul is undernourished. It becomes your compass. Now, it's important to make a distinction here. There is a difference between the slow, simmering poison of repressed resentment and the clean, hot fire of healthy anger. Repressed resentment is what happens when you feel the signal, but you ignore it. You say yes anyway. The alarm bell rings, but you hit the snooze button. This is when the energy turns inward and becomes toxic. It leaks out as passive aggression, sarcasm, and a general sense of victimhood. It is the feeling of being powerless. Healthy anger, on the other hand, is the energy that arises when you have listened to the resentment, identified the boundary and the need, and you are now ready to take action to protect them. It is not about attacking the other person. It is the pure, life-affirming energy of the guardian rising up to defend the kingdom. It is clear, focused, and in service of your wholeness. Much of the shadow work we do is about learning to transmute the murky energy of resentment into the clean energy of anger, which can then be used to fuel compassionate but firm action. So, let's put this all together. You feel the heat of resentment. Instead of suppressing it, you pause. You welcome it. You ask, what no needed to be said here? Then you ask, what core need of mine is this no protecting? You have now completed the most important part of the process. You have brought the unconscious message into the conscious light. You have honored the messenger. You have validated your own experience. Just this act of internal diagnosis can often dissolve a significant amount of the resentment's toxic charge. Because a huge part of the pain of resentment comes from the feeling of self-betrayal. It is the pain of knowing, on a deep level, that you have not stood up for yourself. By taking the time to listen to the message, you are ending the cycle of self-betrayal. You are taking your own side. And that is the first and most powerful step towards setting yourself free. Taking your own side. This is the internal revolution that changes everything. But understanding the message of your resentment is only the first half of the work. The second half is learning to act on that message. Because resentment at its core is trapped energy. It is the life force of a no that was never spoken. It is the energy of a need that was never met. If we only diagnose the problem but never address it, that energy remains trapped. It continues to fester. The ultimate goal of this shadow work is to liberate that energy, to transmute the heavy, stagnant lead of resentment into the clear, dynamic gold of compassionate action. So, once you have used the diagnostic tool, once you have identified the no that needed to be said and the core need it was protecting, what is the next step? The next step is not, as you might fear, a dramatic confrontation. It is not about suddenly becoming a person who yells and makes demands. Carl Jung taught that integration is a subtle art. It is about finding the middle path, the union of opposites. We are not trying to replace the passive persona with an aggressive shadow. We are aiming for a calm, assertive, integrated center. And the way we get there is through micro-actions. I want to offer you a simple 3-level framework for how to act on the information your resentment gives you. Think of these as levels of increasing courage. You always start at level 1. Level 1 is internal validation. This is the very first and most important action you can take. Before you say or do anything externally, you must first validate the message internally. This is a powerful piece of shadow work in itself. Once you've identified the need, you simply say to yourself with conviction, "My need for rest is valid. My desire to say no in that situation was a healthy and protective impulse. I was not wrong to feel that way." Do not underestimate the power of this step. For the recovering people pleaser, whose inner world has been dominated by a harsh inner critic, this act of self-validation is revolutionary. You are reparenting yourself. You are becoming the safe, validating presence you always needed. Often, just this step alone can release much of the resentment's charge. You may find that's all you need to do in that moment. But if the resentment persists, you might be ready for the next level. Level 2, a small unilateral action. A unilateral action is something you do for yourself, by yourself, that does not require anyone else's permission or participation. It is an act of honoring your need in a small, tangible way. Let's go back to Emily, who resented her friend's request. After internally validating her need for rest, a level 2 action might be to simply turn off her phone for the rest of the evening. She is not confronting her friend. She is not making a dramatic announcement. She is simply, quietly, taking an action that serves her own validated need. For Thomas, who resents his father's criticism, a level 2 action might be to make a conscious decision before the next family dinner that he will change the subject every single time his father brings up his career. Again, it's an action he takes for himself. These small unilateral actions are incredibly empowering. They are you taking your power back. They are you proving to yourself that you are capable of meeting your own needs. They build self-trust and self-respect. This might be all that is needed. But sometimes to truly resolve the situation and prevent the resentment from recurring, you may need to move to the final level. Level 3 is compassionate communication. This is the level where you communicate your boundary or your need to the other person. This is often the most feared step, but it doesn't have to be a conflict. The key is to communicate from a place of I, not you.
You are not blaming or attacking the other person. You are simply stating your own reality, your own needs, your own limits. A simple and powerful formula for this is, when you do X, I feel Y because I have a need for Z. In the future, I would appreciate it if you could make a clear, simple request. So for Emily, after practicing level 1 and 2 for a while, she might be ready to say to her friend, "Hey, I want to talk about last week. When you ask me for last-minute help on a weeknight, I feel conflicted and stressed because I have a deep need to protect my evening downtime to recharge. In the future, I'd appreciate it if you could give me at least a day's notice for non-emergency requests. I love helping you, and this will help me do it from a place of joy, not resentment." For Thomas, it might sound like, "Dad, I love you and I value our conversations. When you bring up my career in a critical way, I feel hurt and disrespected because I have a need to be accepted for the choices I've made. In the future, I'm asking you to please not bring up my career. It's not a topic I'm willing to discuss anymore." This is not aggression. This is sacred clarity. It will feel uncomfortable at first. Your heart may pound, your palms may sweat. That is the old trauma response in your body. But with each act of compassionate communication, you are teaching your nervous system that it is safe to have boundaries. It is safe to have needs. It is safe to be you. And you are giving the other person a gift. You are giving them the opportunity to know and love the real you, not the resentful, people-pleasing mask. This is the ultimate alchemy of shadow work. You take the raw, painful lead of resentment, you listen to its message, and you transform it into the gold of a more authentic, honest, and loving relationship with yourself and with the world.
And so, the messenger has delivered its message. We began this journey seeing resentment as a shameful flaw, a poison in our system. We now understand it as a sacred alarm bell, a fiercely loyal guardian sent by our shadow to protect our wholeness. We learned that resentment is not the problem, it is the symptom. The problem is the crossed boundary, the unmet need. We discovered a practical two-step tool to decode its message, asking what no needed to be said and what core need is being ignored. And finally, we learned how to transmute the trapped energy of resentment into the clear, compassionate action of setting boundaries, moving from internal validation to, when necessary, courageous communication. This is one of the most practical and empowering applications of shadow work. It is the process of reclaiming the healthy, protective anger that was exiled from your personality long ago. It is about learning that you can be both a kind person and a fiercely boundaried person. In fact, as Carl Jung might suggest, you cannot be a truly kind person until you are a boundaried one. Because kindness without boundaries is not kindness. It is self-abandonment. As you begin to practice this, as you start to draw these new clear lines around your energy and your time, you may notice something else begin to surface. You may find that it's not just the direct demands of others that trigger you. You may start to resent the silent, unspoken expectations that seem to hang in the air. The expectation to be a certain kind of parent, the expectation to follow a certain career path, the expectation from society, from your family, from your own inner critic to live a life that doesn't feel like your own. You are no longer just resenting individual demands. You are beginning to feel the weight of the entire cage of expectations that has surrounded you. How do we break free from these invisible prisons?
How do we find the courage to live a life defined by our own soul's calling, not by the expectations of others? This is the next great frontier of our journey. It is the path to true freedom, and it is exactly what we will be exploring in our next video. I invite you to subscribe, to continue walking this path of liberation with us. For now, I encourage you to practice becoming a student of your resentment. In the comments below, share one small insight you gained from listening to its message this week. You don't need to share the story, but perhaps just the need it revealed. Was it a need for rest, for respect, for creative time? By naming these needs, we validate them for ourselves and for each other, creating a space where it is safe to have them. Stop fighting your resentment. Stop being afraid of it. It is not a monster. It is a compass, pointing you directly toward the treasure of your own unmet needs. Follow it. It knows the way home.